Welcome back to season 5 of Beardos Media. That's right, we are officially on season 5. Now, those of you who have been watching us for the past few years, we've had a few changes. We have a new co host here. And before we introduce the topic and the new co host, just want to pay homage to our former co host, which is Ali Khan, Traversial, who has held the fort with me for best part of 3 years now. So, mashallah, he's kept his company. He's given us lots to think about. He's entertained you, entertained me, entertained us. So a big thanks goes out to Ali, first of all, before we start this particular episode. And moving on to this episode, we're going to be talking about a topic which is quite close in an academic field for our new co-host. So we're going to have a fruitful discussion, I believe. And before we start that, let's play the intro. Well, that was inevitable, wasn't it, for the first episode ever? Welcome, first of all, Taff, Coach Taff.
Thank you.
On Beardos Media, and being the co-host here tonight, and traveling all the way from Leeds into the Midlands.
Honor to be here. Yes, it was quite a journey down, actually.
Yeah, tell me about it. You're supposed to be here a little bit earlier, but we won't tell the audience that. But no, obviously these things happen and traffic gets in the way. But first of all, before we start, let's have a brief intro about you, because Taff, the reason Taff is here is because Taff himself has multiple kind of ventures going on, some by yourself, some with your wife. You're a coach by profession, but you're here tonight because you have value to add. So tell us a bit about you before we get into the topic.
I think I was talent spotted, wasn't I?
I think you were.
Something like
I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one.
Well, brief overview. Long story short, been involved in the community across the UK for about 25 years or so, and different professions. Recently, probably the last 4 years, particularly with my wife Victoria Mateski, who I hope is going to tune in soon. We've been running an outfit called T for Two, which is all about relationships, right? So intimate relationships, marriage, etc., and how to navigate that. Oftentimes, a complex area, and helping people to build those skills up to have better and stronger relationships. And I've been podcasting myself as well.
That's how we met, because Correct. I remember a couple of years ago you reached out to me.
Correct. Yes.
To have me on your podcast as a guest.
That's right.
And you know what? That's probably one of the reasons why we're sitting here today, because I remember that was one of the most meaningful conversations I'd had on a podcast, because I've done keynote speeches. I get asked to do them. I get asked to come on radio interviews and stuff. But the conversation we were having was very meaningful, and that stayed with me.
And I think conversations have to have an element of critical thinking.
Yeah.
So it's the powerful questions you have to ask, framed around the individual and what this thing means to them, rather than it being, hey, look at me and what I have to say kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been the thread for myself. And equally, you know, to give kudos to you and Brother Ali, you know, your seasons have been great, episodes have been great, very
Thank you.
controversial. Sometimes.
Controversial, yes. He can never get out of this, can he? Whether he's here or not, he's with us in spirit. So yeah, no, thank you so much for that. So Taf, tonight's topic is quite a deep topic for your first topic here on this platform. Should I stay? Hot seat, yeah. I mean, and to be fair, I feel like this is going to be more of, rather than just a two-way conversation, it's going to be a lot that I'm going to probably ask you. I mean, you might ask me a few questions, because one of the things about this platform, which people know us for, is that we speak the minds of people. But people think things and they don't share it with many people.
Don't say it, right?
Yeah, don't say it. And then we go on live and talk about it. And it often gives people food for thought. It gives them an opportunity to maybe understand what other people are thinking if they're faced with the same or similar challenges. So, you know, it's definitely a platform where it gets conversations going and people thinking about these kinds of things. So this particular topic, should I stay or should I go? It's you know,
it's $1 million question, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack, isn't there? Right? I mean, you can first of all split this into, well, what's the context behind this, behind the title? Is it personal relationships? Is it professional relationships? Is it a job? Or, you know, what is it? You know, and I think when we were discussing this topic, we were talking more. We were leaning towards personal relationships.
Yes.
Now, those personal relationships are different, many different kinds of relationships, aren't there? So you have parental relationships, you know, parents and children. You have partners, husband, wife, and so on and so forth. So the question is, when we think about, because I'm assuming in your role as a coach, you'll have come across a lot of people, as have I over the years, who are on that line. You know, they're on the border, they're on the fence, thinking, should I stay or should I go?
Very undecided.
You're very undecided. In your experience, what makes people flip over the edge, like, you know, take that leap?
You know, that leap can sometimes take years. And I think that's the most important thing to kind of maybe explore. Because one might think that it's a decision I make in a moment, that, you know, I've suddenly decided, I've had an epiphany that this is the moment right now, I'm going to go. Sometimes it can take years for someone to get the courage even to leave a relationship. So the longer you've stayed with someone, the more difficult it becomes, due to attachment, being used to a lifestyle, you know, sharing hobbies, etc. And those things tie you together. And therefore, in many ways, it becomes difficult to break that, because the thought of even breaking with someone you've been with for quite a while actually could be almost seen as a small loss, because you're thinking about the future now. If I'm not going to spend time with this person, I'm going to end up living with my mom, maybe. If you're a mommy's boy, I'm going to,
or a girl,
or a girl, right? Where am I going to live? I'm going to change my social circles now, because it might be a new group of friends. Maybe his or her friends might not want to know me anymore. Work, you may have moved away from your hometown. There are so many different variables to this, and there's no one simple answer or solution. But one thing I'd like to talk about is that when I was doing some prep for this, and I like data, and, you know, before pre-1914, the divorce rate was 1 in 450. So we're talking about divorce rates. Right.
What is it now?
Well, most divorces actually initiated by the woman. Almost 75%.
Okay.
So it's
then
now.
Oh, now.
Now.
Okay. Almost 75% of divorces are initiated by women.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you continue to look at the data, so it's 1 in 450, but what we have at the moment is close to 1 in 45%. So almost 1 in 2.
Right. Wow.
So you see the huge shift in terms of how you could say divorce is normalized in one sense.
Okay.
Australia, it's 42%, and US it's close to 50%. And therefore, the question is that it's a thing that's normal these days, and it's not a strange thing to separate. It's initiated mostly by women for many reasons. But the question is, why do individuals get to that point where they feel divorce is the only solution?
You know, that's the question, isn't it? And that's the question we're going to explore. I mean, just off the back of that, I think we should clear that we're not going to give anyone. Don't take this as advice.
No.
What we're talking about tonight, because there are so many finer nuances which we would not know for individual cases. So we're not saying this is what you should do in this particular situation, or if you come across this situation, you should do this, because we don't know what the background is.
No.
But as a general conversation, it's fascinating because I mean, we all know that the rate of divorce has increased, but I did not know it was that much. That's amazing. And it doesn't surprise me either that 75% of divorces are initiated by women, because we have a lot of things influencing those decisions, and the environment has changed, society has changed, people's outlook has changed, what they feel they should have is changed,
and they don't have
what that they don't have.
And one of the things actually on that point is lack of emotional satisfaction from their partners. And if you look at that a bit more deeply, then why is it that when there's a disconnect emotionally between a man and a woman, and she isn't able to get that, or so let's say the man isn't able to give that, right? There's a separation of two people. So if you look at the psychology behind that, what is the state that's actually brought about that kind of scenario, or almost like a cultural norm whereby, you know, there's and you could put it down to lots of different things. You can put it down to social media, if you like. You can put it down to how some individuals might look at the glitz and the glitter in the movies and whatnot, you know, whereby it's kind of seen. You've got these reels or these snapshots of this romantic backdrop of everything happening, and he's just saying everything that she needs to hear,
or she wants to hear.
She wants to hear, yes, right. But reality is,
it's dramatized. That's why they call it a drama.
Yeah,
it's dramatized.
Yeah,
things are exaggerated, aren't they? I think a lot of people have been influenced by the ideal life based on what they consume on either social media or on movies and stuff. And it reminds me of someone's post. I saw someone's post one day that had a kind of an image where people, or not even an image, it was a video where people were taking really like romantic pictures of themselves, like couples. And as soon as they've finished taking the picture, they were like sitting on opposite sides of the sofa.
I think I saw that one actually. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And it's to do with the glitz and the glamour that you were referring to on you know, Insta relationships and Insta celebrities and whatever.
And people will build up a picture in their own minds as that is the ideal.
That is what we
and
need.
It's the dopamine release. You know, I want that 24/7. But it doesn't happen. You can't have dopamine for 24/7, right? It's not possible.
Yeah.
Right. We're human beings, and we have all the highs and lows throughout the day.
Yeah.
And the thing is that does exist, and that can exist.
Yeah, you know what? And it's not just social media, because there are a lot of people out there who are influenced by influencers in other ways as well. And I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I came across a sister who had separated from her husband and was looking for we were talking about business opportunities, and it took me by surprise as to like what had happened, because NLP, and she was also representing an NLP practitioner, or somebody who has a business in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, coaching and stuff like that. They held an event for ladies, and there were a couple of people who were joint, they were partners. And you know, at some of these events they have, you know, like the Tony Robbins style, like, you know, really motivate people
energy,
and energy and all that kind of thing. And they happened to motivate this sister into breaking it off with her husband, and by her own admission,
oh really,
by her own admission, there was nothing wrong in the marriage. Now she's not well, she said she's not regretful of it. But I questioned, I was thinking, well, I didn't want to have this conversation with her, you know, deep down, but I thought to myself, well, why? You know, really, why? If nothing was wrong, in inverted commas, and she was obviously, it was a kind of a passing conversation that we had, because we were talking about something else, and I didn't want to get sidetracked. And she was, you know, she mentioned that, and I thought, how amazing that in the spur of the moment where you're getting down, you know, like sometimes some coaches make you write down what exactly it is you want, what exactly it is that you want to change, and what you must do to change that.
Correct.
To visualize, you know, with clarity where it is you want to be in comparison to where you are now. And she had done that, and she ended up being in that position where she thought, that's it, this is it.
It's really strange you say that, because I read something today on LinkedIn, and it said visualization plus faith equals manifestation.
Interesting.
And the interesting thing was that faith could have been replaced with any aspect of faith, whether it's religious faith or faith in something else.
Yeah.
And you will manifest exactly what that thing stands for you.
Yeah.
Right. So you can visualize whatever you want, as long as you have faith in that thing. You'll manifest something, right?
You'll manifest something. Yeah.
And I guess in some ways, what she did was she had faith in whatever she took on board and internalized and manifested that thing, and says, I'm kind of doing it. I'm making that decision.
Enough is enough. But when is enough enough? You know, this is the question. I mean, in my mind, my question would be, enough of what?
Yeah.
When is enough of what enough? You know, because there could be a lot of enoughs in different ways. So enough of what?
Well, one of the things that, you know, you point out earlier, this is psychoeducation. So it's about sharing that education with other people in terms of knowledge, right? So people have a better understanding of different things. And one of the primary things that, you know, we're always saying, you know, coaching, that if you need therapy, we're not therapists. We're not therapists. And so if someone's been abused, it's either an emergency call or the correct services, right? And that needs a referral. So we're not talking about that. I mean, that's clear. You know, if someone's in a life-threatening situation or getting really physically, emotionally abused, that they need to seek the help in the right place. When we talk about other things about leaving someone, like I said before, it's a decision that sometimes even those that are abused will take many, many years to leave, because it's ironic, because they feel an attachment with the abuser.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
And that attachment is so strong that even they feel guilty in leaving.
Yeah.
And you think, wow, how's that even happen? But there's all sorts of things in terms of that person's past trauma, childhood trauma, inner child stuff, many, many things. And it can lead a person to actually feeling that they're guilty, and they cannot leave this person because poor so-and-so will be ending up, you know, by themselves. So, you know, abuse is abuse. But what I would say, and food for thought for people, is this is really important, that, you know, if your emotional well-being is such that every single day becomes a struggle for you to even want to eat, right? You feel like you're walking on eggshells. You're very careful about what you say. The sensitivities are there. You think, if I say something, somebody will shout at me. This guy or this woman will shout at me, or hit me. Emotionally, you feel drained all the time. You feel a sense of apathy about life. Maybe you cry a lot. You know, you curl up. You're quite introverted, even more so. You've broken those ties with other people. Then you really need to start thinking about seriously about your emotional well-being. Then there's the physical aspect. Do you groom yourself? Do you look after your health? Do you do some form of exercise? It doesn't have to be the gym. It could be anything like a walk or diet even. You know, have you started to neglect the way you look and your clothes? So physically, if the wear and tear is showing on you and it's because of this other person, that's a red flag. Yeah. You know, spiritually, you know, as the famous saying goes that, you know, we're all spirits, you know, having a human experience.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing with that is that if we had an existence before and we have temporarily assumed this physical body, right?
Yeah.
Your body is your body. The size, color, weight, color of eyes, etc., is the only different thing between you and I. But the spirit is what's really the most important thing.
That's you, really.
That's really me, yeah. Because this spirit,
this is just a vessel, as they say.
Exactly,
isn't it? The
yes.
body is a vessel,
and this spirit is going to continue onto the journey, as we believe, to the hereafter. If your spirituality is suffering to such a degree that you've even today, somebody was saying, and I can't say where, that they don't care about faith, they don't care about their deen, right? Experiences. Somebody was saying that they've stopped praying. This wasn't today, it was beforehand. Stop praying. Some people disillusioned, because if you use faith as a benchmark, right? I will marry this person because they have faith, they're faithful, and they do something that shatters that, right? You become disillusioned.
I think you could be disillusioned before marrying somebody, because a lot of the times, most people, especially, I mean, we've got to address the fact that in different environments, relationships take a different course, and they have different outcomes, and different within different cultures as well. If you look at the cultures in the southeast region, it's different. Southeast Asia, it's different. You know, people have this commitment to make it work for all sorts of reasons. Partially, maybe because the opportunities to detach themselves from that relationship are not so easy to come by as they are in the Western world. Yes. Partially because of the culture there. Partially because they've never seen anything different, and that's the norm for them. So they're not. I mean, until they come onto social media and start watching dramas, you know. So there is that element. But I think there are a lot of people it was the same for me when I got married. I didn't go into any kind of deep dive in a course on marriage fiqh. You know what I mean? The jurisprudence, what are a husband's role and what is a wife's role, and you know, what are your duties that you have to fill, you are obliged to. There are some which are obvious, but then a lot of times, you know, you don't come across other things and other options which are given to you, which you could avail, which you haven't availed, which you maybe should have availed. I'll give you a classic example. I was talking about this the other day with somebody, and we were talking about second marriages as an example. And you know, there's an option. I mean, by default, it's a monogamous relationship, right? By default. But obviously in the Islamic culture, a man can have up to 4 wives, but the wife also has the right to put a clause in to say, no, I don't want that.
Correct.
If I'm marrying you, I don't want you to take on another wife. But she's not aware that she can do that.
She isn't.
Right. And then so when a man goes and marries another wife, then she realizes, hang on, you know, what's going on here? I mean, in some cases, like my missus, she's like, go on, go for it. Just don't bring her home. You know, she's like that. But I've never kind of
never crossed your mind, has it?
No, I can't say it hasn't crossed my mind. It has crossed my mind. I'm a man at the end of the day, but I've never, you know, taken that route. But I can see how this is a problem for a lot of even women, because they don't understand that there are options available for them, especially in the Islamic marital. The reason I'm bringing this up, and because the non-Islamic version is just monogamy and that's it.
Mm.
But there are some complexities within the Islamic marital household.
So it's a really good point you made there. So let's say a gentleman really isn't a gentleman.
Okay.
And what he can do, he can abuse certain rights he has.
Yeah.
And then what we see in our work is spiritual abuse.
Okay. Yeah.
So that spiritual abuse manifests itself even on a day-to-day level. Never mind marriage. It's like you should. If you don't do this, it's hellfire. You know, it's like really extreme things. And it's like,
this is your religious duty.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's instead of now obeying and worshiping the Creator, you're like worshiping this man.
Yeah.
Or even a woman.
Yeah, because there's a Punjabi saying, there's a Punjabi Bajaji Khuda.
Bajaji Khuda, exactly. Yeah? Yes, that's right. Yes.
Which in itself is wrong.
Yes.
We can't even use that term, the term Khuda associated to man, right? And but it's something that's been passed down through different cultures. Because I think there's if I'm not mistaken, there is that perception within the Hindu culture that the husband has that kind of a role in the wife's life. I mean, from what I remember reading a little bit about history and in the Hindu history in India. What they used to do is, when there's certain group of people, I can't remember the name of that, but now we're on the subject, that if the husband died, they used to cremate the wife with him. Alive.
Right. Wow.
And that's how much kind of like you cannot have another man.
The attachment and that thing.
That's it. You're there. You know. Wow. So that was like, and then I think that's because obviously Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, they all lived together in India at the time. They were all influenced by each other's cultures. So yeah, you're right. I mean, the Bajaji Khuda thing, people use that as, even now I've heard the term where people have referred to their husbands as Bajaji Khuda, and I'm like,
and this is the thing, Brother Majid, is that, you know, when we're talking about should you stay or should you go, right?
Reminds me of the song, should I stay?
Should I go now? That's right.
Yeah. I'll stop singing. Just to lighten the mood.
You have no idea how many times that's played in my head.
That was the whole point for it. Go ahead.
So the thing with that is that, you know, when someone deliberately, right, premeditated, right, deliberately abuses something, right, to really get at you and almost in a way diminish your sense of self-worth, and, you know, even worthlessness creeps in, like, you know, I'm not worthy of anything right now, and I should be happy with what I have, because, you know, the mindset is that if this is my destiny, this is my destiny, this is a test. But we've got to separate that between the behaviors of human beings, right? We can't make excuses for people who are misbehaving to a degree where it's abuse, and it's like, you know, like I said, spiritual abuse even. So some people have even suffered so much that they don't trust people of that faith.
I've come across that. I've come across people saying that, you know what, I've lost somebody. My friend Abid was telling me he knows somebody who said, I've lost trust in men, and you know what, I, as a consequence, I've lost trust in the faith. You know, it's gone to that extreme.
Yeah. So there's no excuse for those types of people, because what they do is they abuse everything in the name of faith. And, you know, if someone is literally not able to get to a point where it's never their fault, right? Even when you try to connect with them on a level where you want to have more emotional connection, physical intimacy, even connection up here in the mind as well, you know, and they don't want any of that, then really you could ask yourself a question: is that what value do I get with this person apart from being in the same house as them? What is that relationship about? Because relationship is between two people. It's how you relate to each other, right?
It's not, though, is it? Really, it is, and it's not. I agree, it is about two people, but I think it's not just that kind of prevents people from thinking beyond them two as people, because let's just say kids are involved.
Oh, then it's a different matter.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And let's just say, like, and I've come across situations where people from wealthy backgrounds have gone back home and married women from, or girls from, not so wealthy backgrounds, and taken advantage of them, brought them here. You know, the typical thing sometimes, I don't know if it's common anymore. It used to be the case when munda apna bigad gaya to, you know, you take your son to, let's get him married. That's the solution. If he's off the rails, get him married. That's the solution. That's not the solution. In fact, I've seen it happen to girls as well. Girls are off, you know, come off track, rather than having a look inside themselves to see, well, where did we go wrong with this, with our upbringing of this child? It's like, oh, she's in bad company, or she's off the rails, or he's off the rails, getting married off. They haven't got the foggiest, right? They've gone back home, got them married to some poor bloke or poor girl, right? Brought them over. And I've known of blokes, you know, working in the house like slaves for their wives, for their British wives, and abused. And they feel that they have no other choice because, you know, their parents are old, they can't, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And the same with the girls, because there's a big stigma still in terms of separation within certain cultures, and that prevents people from leaving. And then they end up, you know, let's just say one of them get pregnant, you know, so, and they have kids. And then it's for the sake of the kids. They think, well, I'm gonna. They're self-sacrificial. It's like a sacrificial lamb. You know what I mean? They're self-sacrificing for the sake of their children, and they say, like, you know what? I've got kids now. I've got to think about them. I don't care about myself. And I know it's a bit of an extreme example, but it's not so extreme in certain cultures. I've seen it time and time and time again. And you think, you know what? How can that happen so many times? You know, but it's a very common thing.
So, you know, the saying goes, it's better to come from a broken home than be in a broken home, especially for the well-being of children. So imagine a couple who are continuously arguing in front of the children. That creates the initial trauma experience that children have, and it almost normalizes that this is what communication is like for adults. And the case is sometimes, actually, probably mostly, where if a couple argue, they'll argue in front of the children, but when they make up, it's not in front of the children.
Yeah.
It's elsewhere.
Yeah.
So children don't even learn how to make up, or what making up looks like.
Well, hopefully they don't. Look at what they're really making up like. There's some kinds of making up that you don't want the kids to see.
No, that's too early. Right. You're right. So those are the things that we need to kind of consider, is that, look, if what it means is that we're going to traumatize another generation, then maybe it's me who breaks the cycle. Because if it continues, and that cycle, you know, continue forever and a day until someone says, actually, I'm going to stop it now. It is a tough decision. But I think you got to stack up all the things that if you don't do that, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's
and
like,
if I do even stay,
then
what happens?
Well, I always ask, if anybody's bringing that question to me, I ask them the 4-part question, you know, the coaching questions. What will happen if you do? What will happen if you don't? What won't happen if you do? What won't happen if you don't?
Absolutely brilliant. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because a lot of people think about, well, what'll happen if I do, and what will happen if I don't, but they don't think about what won't happen if I do, and what won't happen if I don't.
And what you're saying is that people then can make a considered decision.
Yeah.
It's not just an emotional thing. It's not like off the cuff, like, yes, I'm going to do it. They really looked at all the options and choices and variables and whatnot. And in the end, they're making a considered decision. And that's what really helps people not to regret a decision. Because mostly what people have is regret.
Yeah.
This thought of, if I do this, then this is going to happen, and I'll make other people suffer, or I'll let other people down, and, you know, whatever else.
And I think, you know, one of the wonderful things that you do, which I respect you for, is it's one of the things that I was really having a discussion about with one of my nephews. One of my nephews, he was still asking me, am I still reading up on philosophy, and am I still doing those deep thinking quotes and all that? And he was telling me that he was reading up on he's reading a book called about self-care.
Right.
And he was telling me how important, he felt looking after yourself is, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, yeah, it's important. And then he mentioned a couple of things, and I said to him, look, the only thing I would say is scrutinize who the author is as well. Whenever you're reading something like this, and whenever you're talking about or considering these kinds of things, you need to think about who this person is who's giving you advice, and do their values match yours? And this is why I respect what you do, because you have this the influence of Islam around your coaching style and the advice that you might give, or the questions that you might ask.
Yeah, so we have this line: inspired by deen,
yeah,
driven by data.
Okay.
So we're inspired by our faith, and we have an amazing assessment that actually tells you, or gives you a snapshot really of your relationship right now.
Victoria says, sometimes people can manipulate. One day saying something positive, forward thinking for the relationship, the next day the opposite. They may make accusations and treat you disrespectful. So it's important that the effort must be looked at holistically. It is real, or is it real, or just a matter of trying to make a quick fix? Absolutely. That's a great point. So the important thing that I was mentioning is the value system. Who are you being coached by? Who are you learning from? Who are you taking advice from? Because if their values aren't the same as yours, then you're going to be risking your own future.
Like the example gave earlier on about all this hype, and she left.
Yeah.
And it can be that you can be really hyped up for a few moments, emotional. And these events sometimes be so energetic, and you'd be so energized that you think, right now I'm feeling great about this, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Victoria again says, trauma from the past must be addressed, and you need to find a partner that has the capacity to hold space while you are on your healing journey. Otherwise, if they are unable, it may be time to go. Exactly. It's true. And I think whatever decision you make, it's always going to be your own decision. If you decide to stay, it's going to be your decision. If you decide to go, it's going to be your decision. But what is that decision influenced by? Who is it influenced by?
Yes.
And in what kind of framework are they considering the leaving? And this is why I think, I think is it Malaysia who have a mandatory course, premarital mandatory course on the fiqh of marriage.
Yes.
On the rights and responsibilities
yes.
of either partner before they get married.
Yes.
And I think that's a wonderful idea. I've told my kid that they're going to do the same.
It's a bit of a caveat there.
Is there? Go on.
Yeah, I was surprised when I found this out. So the same, actually in America, there's an institute called the Family and Youth Institute, Muslim-led. And they did some research around divorce. They do lots of research, and their research showed that 33%, 1 in 3 American Muslims get divorced.
Okay.
And 80% of those didn't have any premarital education. Right. So premarital education was key.
Yeah.
And those that did, 9 out of 10 would be less likely to divorce.
Makes sense.
And in fact, it reduced the likelihood of divorce by 33%. But those who do take it, 9 out of 10 are less likely to divorce.
Yeah.
Now, what they advocate is that pre-marital education is important. And what it does is it gives you the not only capacity, but capability to do marriage. So you learn all the skills. You become more consciously aware of what the nuances are in a relationship between two people.
Here's a question for you, Taf, on that note.
Yes.
What does marriage look like is what they're really answering here. On these courses. But what can it look like if you're not a follower of any particular faith? It's an open field,
you can have a typical.
What's a typical marriage?
Or you can have a transformational marriage.
What's a typical marriage?
Typical will be lending.
Okay.
Transactional.
Okay.
Right. Role, rights and responsibilities. It's like.
Yeah, but how? But here's the question, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
If it's not based on a theological framework, what are your rights and responsibilities?
So what it is, those people just stay there.
Just there in the house, in the room.
No, yeah, that's what.
Well, that's what it was.
But those people who use that framework and stay within the framework, what they're doing is they're following the letter of the law. And what we say is follow the spirit of the law.
When you say the letter of the law, what do you mean?
It means it's all the fundamentals of the rights and responsibilities, which are important because it gives you the framework. But what comes beyond the framework is what the Prophet ﷺ did. So how he would have fun with his wife, how he would be empathetic, how he would...
Yeah, he would race with Aisha after Asr, we know about that. He'd
tease her, he'd play with her, share food. So really that's your transformational marriage, because what's happening now is you're engaged with this other human being.
Yeah, but that again is based in what we're taking as inspiration from a religious figure here.
Yes.
My question is, if marital rights and responsibilities aren't based on anything, what is a marriage course worth?
I guess for those people who get it right, it's they get it right, and it's not... I'd say it's an anomaly.
It's right for them.
It's right for them.
It's what
it
they
works
want
for them. Absolutely,
isn't it?
Yeah. You can agree any terms you like with any other human being.
So here's the other question then. When today you have people who want to commit themselves to one another and they want to get married, and they're not religious, but they still tend to do the religious thing. Most of the times, they'll want the ladies will want the white dress and go into church. There's a religious kind of an umbrella there, but they're not religious themselves. And I think that's a problem for them. I think if they're going to embrace embrace that element of marriage, they need to look at what that represents within that faith as well.
I think that's
otherwise it's just a registry, isn't it?
That's the dissonance you talk about, right?
Yeah.
So there's that disconnect there.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think deep down
they know
exactly.
There's cognitive dissonance there,
right.
Isn't there?
That's right. Exactly. Deep down they know.
Yeah.
But
they don't address it.
And one of the most difficult things that we come across with our clients, the most difficult things that they navigate and find a struggle, and that's what they know in their minds with what they feel in their hearts,
what they think they know
at the time. Yeah, but it's that push-pull between the two.
Yeah.
So mind saying one thing,
classic example of dissonance.
Yes, and the heart saying another thing.
Yeah.
Now, mentally, like you said before, that who are you reading this stuff from? Where you're getting this information from? And if that's your influence, then yes, your mind's going to tell you those things, or you're going to be influenced by those factors. But deep down, your heart might think, even though I don't believe this,
it sounds good.
It sounds really good. Yes,
and it fits
sold it to me,
and it fits well with everybody else, and it'll look good on social media for the clicks and the likes and whatnot. Yeah,
absolutely. So we have this difference between a typical relationship and a transformational one, from just being transactional, right, to being very mutual in a higher sense. So we talk about spirit of the law. Spirit of the law is that the rules and regulations were there for a reason, because ultimately for us as believers, Allah talks about the sakina, that peace, and when that peace arrives, it arrives through mutual love and mutual mercy.
Yeah.
And it's that mercifulness that we need with other people. So if one person in that marriage, in that relationship, isn't being merciful, or doesn't concede, and is always very staunch, and their ego's right at the front, it becomes very difficult for the other person to continue to give. So sometimes people have to stop thinking about taking and think, how can I give
or not take as much,
or not? Yeah, exactly. No, you're right, 100%.
Because it doesn't always have to be you have to give, because some people aren't emotionally giving, romantically giving as much. It's not in them. And for them to come to that realization, or for them to change, or you to try and change them, you might as well bang your head against a brick wall. But for them to have so many expectations from the other without not necessarily taking, but to, take less, that's a good start. And this is what brings us to the question, doesn't it? I mean, when we think about, when is enough enough, the question is, first, as I mentioned earlier, well, what is it? What we were referring to as when is what enough? But the follow up to that is, when you're in a relationship and you have so many different things going on, you have the right to understand, to a degree, a bit more about the person that maybe you think you don't understand, or you feel that you understand, before signing the dotted line. And I think sometimes a lot of people forget that when they're considering the arranged marriage stuff. And it's funny, I mentioned arranged marriage just now. One of my a sister who's a revert sister was talking about, she's recently reverted with me, and she was talking to her mum, and she was just having a joke with me, saying, look, I think she's thinking of getting me an arranged marriage because I'm a Muslim now. I said, well, you do know arranged marriage is not,
that's a done thing, right?
It's not an Islamic notion, it's more of a cultural thing. But yeah, coming back to that, it's also important to consider that, when you're marrying somebody, or when you're thinking of leaving that somebody you've married, what did you marry them for? What's changed in between? Do you even talk to each other? You're talking, we were talking about mercy and stuff, but we were talking about also language of love, your love languages. And some people will go really deep into things before they get married to do these assessments on themselves, and some people haven't got a clue.
Well, mashallah, I'll tell you a lovely story. My wife Victoria, mashallah, assalamu alaikum. She when we were courting, because we were courting, for those people who don't know, 4,000 miles apart. So she lived in America at the time. We never met, and we had this 4 months of getting to know each other.
Okay.
So her primary language of love is physical touch. And I'd never heard of love languages before. And I'm thinking, what is this thing? When she eventually told me, but she didn't tell me first, because she needed to establish whether I was game, right, whether I was open-minded enough or not, about this thing. So at the time, actually, I was on a committee at a mosque, and she asked me the question. She said, look, like, just pretend we're married, right? We come outside in the courtyard of the mosque, and you see the imam and stuff, and would you hold my hands?
Okay. In front of the imam.
So I'm thinking, imam, committee members, the worshippers, it'd be okay if I'm just a guy, who just prays with everyone else, but I'm on the committee.
Yeah.
And that, like, literally that minute was the longest minute ever. So the first 15 seconds was thinking about what the imam would say. The next 15 was what the committee members would say.
Yeah.
And then
what would the rest of the mohalla say?
Exactly. Then I'm thinking, we're married, it's halal. So I answered back in 60 seconds, said, well, if we're married, then it's halal, I'd hold your hand.
Yeah.
That's it.
If you wanted me to. That's the thing, you forgot to tell her that bit. Well, if you really wanted me, you're thinking inside, weren't you? Is what you weren't inside you. If you really wanted me, then right. Yeah, of course I'd hold your hand, love.
That's right. So she was trying to establish a couple of things. Whether that language of love she explained to me, mine's a physical touch. So if you're a guy who didn't like touchy-feely stuff, you kind of like averse to that, then we'd have to talk, right? And second thing was she was trying to establish whether I was open-minded or not. Because if you're open-minded, then you consider something, don't you? You think, oh, what's the value of this, or how can it help, or why is this even a question?
Yeah.
So language of love is profound, because my one of my top love languages is actually words of affirmation. And I know straight away, when I look back in my life, the times when people used to tell me off. And I won't say who, but when I got half decent grades, it was like, why didn't you get an A?
Yeah.
And that's the worst thing you can say to someone who's love language is words of affirmation, because what they need is a bit of praise. And I remember a cousin, he got an E, and his father's going, Shabash, mashallah. He's giving him all this praise. And I'm thinking, I wish my dad was like that. And the thing is, it has a huge effect.
It does have a huge effect. I think there's also the opposite is okay as well. If you don't have compatibility in that regard, as long as you're aware of it.
Correct. Yes.
That's okay as well. So one person may be a touchy-feely person, the other person may not be at all.
No.
But as long as you're aware of how to manage that, that's fine as well. Not everybody's the same. You're not always going to find somebody who's 100% compatible with you.
Correct.
And I think this is one of the reasons why also people decide to break away, is because they feel that, oh, this is missing or that is missing. And you know, you could have 101 things missing. It doesn't mean to say that it's the right decision to break up. I think a lot of people give up too early. They do. I mean, when you've got two people who speak the same language, brought up from the same culture, in the same, you know, two British Asians, let's just take as an example, they're British. They're Asians. They understand their own culture. They understand the Western culture. They're brought up. They speak the same language. They understand humor, of, you know, the British humor, whatever. Then there's more of a chance for that, or in theory, there should be more of a chance for that to work, because you're supposed to understand more about each other, and at least you will have had some kind of understanding of each other and about each other before you got married. And when you get married, you have more of a reason to work on it.
You know, some of the things that are missing though with Majid, if you want a couple of questions, that's fine as well.
Should we address this one first? Yeah, Adam says, I realized for me that I have different giving and receiving love languages. My giving love languages are words of affirmation and acts of service. My receiving is quality time and physical touch.
All right,
interesting. Yeah, interesting.
That's a different twist of things. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Really helpful. Some of the things that I think are missing is one or two things. One is the lack of skills. Right, you know, in our workplace we have inductions, we have the whole training thing, and we build up our skills over time, mentor and everything, and then we get cracking, right? When we want to pursue a career, we might do a degree. It takes us 3 years, right, to get a degree at least, or get a driving license. It might take us 6 months. When it comes to marriage, yallah, it's done, right? There's no preparation. So if
my son was 5 years old and I told him he's getting married as soon as he's of legal age, I'm prepared. I prepared earlier. Still got a few years to go, but I'm just saying, But you know what? It's true. You're absolutely right. And I think, you know what that comes down to? Lack of self-awareness from the people who are guiding us, and from us guiding ourselves. Lack of self-awareness. If we don't have awareness of ourselves, and again, these are discussions I have all the time with people. Well, who are you? Really, who are you? You know, if you don't understand who you are, when you know yourself, when you really know yourself, and someone asks you a question, who are you? You should be able to answer just like that, because there's maybe multiple sides of you: the professional side, personal side, you know, what you religiously ascribe to, whatever. But if you can't answer that question, then somewhere or another you're going to stumble again and going to have a lot of harsh lessons to learn in life before you move forwards more successfully.
Well, mashallah, Victoria's on here, and she's come up with this amazing concept, and we were delivering this a couple of weeks' time to actually reverts, and it's called your spiritual blueprint.
Oh, okay.
The thing is that everyone has a spiritual blueprint, and it's to do with how a person spiritually is almost like by default designed. Some people have a soft temperament. Some people will be a bit more harsher. Some people, we give an analogy. So, and it's all about faith alignment. So you have to be on the same motorway, heading in the same direction. The direction is towards Jannah, right?
Yeah.
The motorway is Islam.
Inshallah. Yeah.
And you're heading in the same direction. Some couples may be on the same motorway, but one's far ahead in their spiritual and understanding.
Yeah.
But you may have a revert or convert.
Yeah.
But maybe back here.
Yeah.
Right. And that spiritual blueprint is theirs. Meaning you can't make her jump ahead.
Yeah.
And him jump back.
Yeah.
And so each one has to understand their frame of reference. But also how they almost respect that both have a specific experience, and they're in a specific space, spiritual space, and that has to be respected.
100%.
Because if you have a couple living in Britain, brought up here, they may have a different spiritual blueprint.
Yeah.
And how many times do couples ask that before they get married? let's look at how our faith is aligned. And the kind of opposite to that is people on the same motorway but traveling in different directions. Yeah. One person's going towards Allah, one's going both Muslim, right?
Yeah.
And there are some people not even on the same motorway.
100%. And you know where it gets even more complicated? I mean, we're talking about couples just now, but when you've got people who are deciding whether to stay or go, and that decision has an impact on the rest of the family, whether it be children, whether it be parents, you've come across a situation, I'm sure you've heard of them, I've heard of them, where if one person decides to break off from a marriage, they're boycotted from the rest of the family, or their side of the family, not just the in-laws, their own side of the family. And then you think to yourself, because one of the questions we had was, when is it okay to sever ties? Because from a religious perspective, we're always taught, severing of ties is not okay. It's not permissible. And I think if you're not the one initiating the severance, then that's fine. But when people are, and again, this goes back, we should always relate this back to the framework. By what framework are you measuring whether this is a success or not? What value system are we measuring the success or failure of any relationship? So if the relationship, even with your own siblings, your own parents, is not measured against that specific framework, then it's not a framework worthy of consideration.
Well, I'll share something. Actually, a client of mine has a real, I was with him a couple of days ago, actually, had a real problem with his mother. And he had this scenario. In fact, I won't share that one because in case he views this later on.
Okay.
But there is someone else that had an issue with a very close relative. And that close relative actually was spiritually abusing them.
Right.
Really, to an nth degree. Said, actually, you won't smell Jannah at all.
Wow.
To that degree.
Take it out.
And yeah, exactly. And you're thinking about, breaking ties or not. So the question at that point comes that severing of ties doesn't mean that you continuously put yourself in front of this human being who has no respect, right, for Allah's mercy, who actually tells us to be mercy. Every surah in the Quran, apart from one, it starts with Bismillah, right? Yeah. It talks about mercy. Even the Prophet ﷺ says, I've only been sent as a mercy to mankind. If you cannot be merciful enough and keep telling this person you're not going to go to Jannah, then really what you should do is protect your own self. Yeah. And you can say Salaam alaikum and that's it. You haven't broken ties.
Yeah.
You don't have to go eat roti at the house or do other things and,
just create a distance.
That's it. Salaam alaikum wa alaikum salam. You haven't broken the tie, but you said salam because they have that right to receive and give. And so let's think of keeping ties in that sense if it becomes that extreme.
Well, I mean, my point would be just that breaking or severing of ties. I mean, with your siblings, it's forbidden, yes, but it doesn't mean you can't create a distance, like some distance, rather than eating out of the same plate and seeing each other every day, whatever. Just create a distance.
Well, Victoria gives a really great distinction. She goes, "Don't put up barriers, but create boundaries."
Yeah.
So barriers is closing people off.
Okay.
But boundaries keep things safe, and you have a door.
Yeah.
And you open the door when you want to open the door.
100%.
And close it when you want to close it.
100%.
Mashallah, she's very clever, isn't she?
She is very clever. How did you bag that one? I'm just checking.
She bagged me, bro.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit.
She dropped it to my DMs, brother, for the record.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That is on record now. It's on record. So, Sister Victoria, no comments. I'm not saying anything in this discussion. I already lost all my hair. So now on that note, we are obviously coming up to an hour of having this discussion, and that hour has just flown by. I'm sure there's so much more to discuss on this, and we could have continued for a lot longer. But seeing as it's our first episode together with Taf, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us, and hopefully we'll continue this.
Any questions that we need to
I
address?
don't see any particular questions. Tazim has said that I 100% totally agree with Brother Taf. There's a process, I believe. And she says, us reverts go on our own journey with a connection that only we know. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
And it is, and exactly that, you know, and I think a lot of the times people born Muslims forget that. They feel, you know, one of the tricky things is getting to talk about the deen in its pure form for most born Muslims, unless they're educated in the field, because a lot of people have been brought up as Muslims with culture seeping into their beliefs, thinking that this is Islam. It's not.
No.
There's a lot of cultural stuff that goes on in there, and then unless we, and I always say this as well, and there's loads of quotes to, you know, associated with this, where unlearning something is harder than learning something new. So unlearning what you already know is harder than, and when it comes to faith, it's the hardest thing to convince other people of changing, because it's a matter of faith.
Yes.
So when someone's brought up in a certain way, and you say, "Well, hang on, you know what? That you know that's not a part of the faith," and they say, "Hang on, we say Bismillah, we do this, or we certain acts of worship because it's related to the faith," and you're telling someone not to do it, they're like, "What are you on about?" It doesn't register, it doesn't click, and they feel that you might be taking them away from the faith. So it's important that in those relationships, especially when you're in a relationship with somebody who's new into the faith, I would say the people who are new in the faith, if they've been in the, researching or studying independently, they'll probably know the faith in its purest form better than some of the born Muslims especially from Southeast Asia.
For the record, at age 30 is when I became a conscious Muslim. So I reverted at 30.
You and I have something in common there. It wasn't 30 for me, it was 25.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Yes. It was just one of those things, I had to do it.
Yeah.
And I had to read every other book outside Islam. And
same here.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did exactly the same thing. In fact, I there was a stage where I was questioning so many things before going back into this. A born Muslim, practicing household, alhamdulillah, we all practice. But in that time between the age of 22 to 25, you know, questioning a lot, you could argue that I'd become agnostic at that stage. I questioned the existence of a God. That's how far I went into this, and I'm glad Allah took me through that journey. That's the way I see it, because my journey here, where I am now, it was an educated one, and based on a lot of research. I went to do a hadith course in London, and you know, studied, you know, so there are a lot of things that I had to do for me to be a conscious Muslim, as you put it. Yeah.
La ilaha, there is no God. So that was the first period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you got to negate before you.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. MashaAllah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. So yeah, we were about to close the show, and we've got Shabnam saying some great nuggets shared. Thank you, Majid and Taf. Thank you for joining us, everybody who have joined us and commented. We always appreciate it. It has been over an hour now, and we have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. Absolutely. And many more to come along with this. Please do like, share, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not even watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. We've never really pushed the YouTube channel, but it's always helpful to get more exposure. And if you have any ideas of discussions and topics that you want us to discuss, like we said, on this platform, we talk about the things you think about, but don't talk about them enough. So with that being said, have a good evening, and inshallah, we'll see you in the next one.